Move over, Evangelicals. Non-churchgoers now rule the GOP. The religious right might be flexing its muscles as it pushes to restrict abortions and ban gender-affirming surgery for minors in many states. But when it comes to strength in the Republican Party these days, the real brawn can be often found elsewhere, among the less religious. This isn't to say that Republicans are giving up on faith. 9 in 10 Republicans believe in God, and 87% say the Bible is either the literal or inspired Word of God. But as the country as a whole becomes less religiously active, so, too, is the GOP. This non-practicing bloc of the party has grown ever more powerful, silently driving much of the GOP's agenda and forcing it to adopt a more populist bent. Non-churchgoers played a central role in pulling the GOP toward Donald Trump and his brand of populism over the past 6 years. In the early years of the Trump administration, they were the most likely to support his hard line on immigration. This explains why they saw Trump as an ideological ally. On a 7-point scale running from very liberal to very conservative, the average non-church-going Republican placed both themselves and Trump in the somewhat conservative camp. Weekly church attendees, by contrast, saw a larger gap between Trump's ideology and their own. As Trump's first term wore on, these non-attendees remade the GOP in their own image. By 2022, weekly churchgoers largely shifted their views on many issues to match those of their less religiously active peers. For instance, 85% said they wanted $25 billion in new border spending, including a wall on the border with Mexico. Republicans almost unanimously approved of Trump's economic policies, a mix of traditional GOP tax cuts and populist trade deals favoring U.S. manufacturers. Weekly church attendees pushed Trump right on some issues, such as abortion. But Trump shifted their entire worldview, convincing them that his populism was true conservatism. Soon, they saw a thrice-married adulterer who routinely defied GOP orthodoxy as one of their own. Of course, less religious voters haven't won every dispute within the GOP. On abortion, the most faithful voters run the show, even though they're much more likely to support total bans than non-church-going Republicans. Perhaps this helps explain, at least in part, why many less religious voters came to view Trump, who embraced the anti-abortion cause while in office, as significantly more conservative than when he was first elected. Non-church-going voters don't want their party to go too far on abortion, and Republican leaders would be wise to listen to them. Strict abortion bans are radioactive outside the most devout corners of the Republican Party, which is partly why congressional Republicans lost so many close races in the 2022 midterms. Non-church-going Republicans could help the party in other respects as well. They have shown a greater capacity for reflection than many of their partisan peers. Most voters struggle to view their own leaders clearly, but less religious voters accurately tracked Trump's shift from an iconoclastic populist outsider to someone who is willing to support typical Republican policies. The GOP could benefit from more of that clarity. Less religious Republicans have also shown they can introduce new issues to a sclerotic party. They're pushing back against outmoded libertarian economic ideas. And the ugly, secular culture wars they've pushed, such as the border wall, arguably helped put Trump in the White House. Expect more changes like this in the GOP if non-churchgoers continue to gain power. Candidates who are nominally religious but deeply populist, in the mold of Trump's 2016 candidacy, will become more common. Meanwhile, traditional white evangelicals such as former Vice President Mike Pence won't go extinct, but their power will wane. A new Republican Party might emerge, thick with Christian symbolism, light on religious practice and ecumenical in its culture wars. This Republican Party would be less pious and polite. But it might be able to win more elections. Move over, Evangelicals. Non-churchgoers now rule the GOP. The religious right might be flexing its muscles as it pushes to restrict abortions and ban gender-affirming surgery for minors in many states. But when it comes to strength in the Republican Party these days, the real brawn can be often found elsewhere, among the less religious. This isn't to say that Republicans are giving up on faith. As Elizabeth Holmes heads to prison, has Silicon Valley learned anything? Elizabeth Holmes tried finding a workaround, but the disgraced Silicon Valley entrepreneur must finally report to prison on Tuesday. Silicon Valley, for its part, has barely paused to notice. Federal prosecutors indicted Holmes 5 years ago on multiple counts of conspiracy and defrauding investors and patients through her failed Silicon Valley startup, Theranos. Convicted early last year on 4 of those charges and sentenced to 11 years and 3 months in prison, Holmes is set to report to a minimum security prison camp about 100 miles from Houston. Holmes made multiple efforts to wiggle out of doing time, including repeated maneuvers by a legal team estimated to have cost more than $30 million. She allegedly contemplated fleeing to Mexico. And since her conviction, she and her partner, Billy Evans, conceived a second child. She gave birth in February. Holmes revealed in a fawning profile in the New York Times, which recast her as Liz, that she has been volunteering for a rape crisis hotline. Holmes' saga was always a Rorschach test for how to think about the Valley, a cautionary tale that either exposed the fake-it-till-you-make-it mentality of startups or served as a prime example of the deep-seated misogyny in the technology industry. How is it that a woman is going to jail while the Valley, although chock full of geniuses, still shields a remarkable number of entitled male grifters cashing in on all the ready money? More likely, Holmes will be remembered as a colorful executive who lied about what her company could do and suffered the consequences. When her trial began in September 2021, much was made about what her case said about an industry that changed the world, and not always for the better. Yet despite her black turtlenecks and Stanford dropout cred, neither Holmes nor Theranos was really of Silicon Valley. Her venture capital backers weren't among the A-list investors who had funded the likes of Apple, Google, and Facebook. Theranos was a medical device company, a totally distinct, and, truth to tell, junior varsity, subset of the information technology ecosystem. But with a bit of hindsight, it's already clear that Holmes' conviction and Theranos' failure have had zero impact on the hubristic culture of the startup world, tut-tutane predictions to the contrary. As you read this, entrepreneurs and investors who run the gamut from charlatans to visionaries are setting aside business plans focused on vague cryptocurrencies and the blockchain and refocusing instead on generative artificial intelligence. Sad you never figured out crypto? Don't be. VC investments in the technology behind the popular ChatGPT revolution grew more than tenfold to $4.5 billion last year from 2018. A new gold rush has begun. Despite widespread layoffs, tech companies large and small are humming along. Apple, Microsoft, and Alphabet, Google's parent company, are each worth well over $1 trillion. Nvidia, which supplies semiconductors to computers that host the large language models that power AI applications, has supplanted Intel as the dominant chip